Now, if you are a fan of iris perfumes, and specifically if you're a fan of some of the sweeter iris perfumes on the market, I think I have a real special treat for you today. This one is called Iris Malikhan by Maison Crivelli. It's been receiving a lot of praise, and I finally got around to smelling it, and I'm going to tell you, I think the praise is very well justified. I'm excited to give you my thoughts on this fragrance, so make sure to stay tuned. Now, before I begin my review of Iris Malikhan by Maison Iris Malikhan by Maison Crivelli, and I tell you all about this fragrance, the smell, the performance, what notes really jump out at me, I do want to start things off by saying that if you are new to this channel, please do consider supporting the channel by subscribing to it. Hit the bell icon so you can be notified on new fragrance reviews, top 10 videos, special giveaways, so on and so forth. And of course, hit that thumbs up button if you take something of value from today's episode. So here we have an iris-based perfume, and looking at the note breakdown, this one did come out back in 2020 if I'm not mistaken. When you take a look at the note breakdown, you see iris, leather, vanilla, galbanum, amber, so you have some resinous notes, mimosa, which kind of makes it a little dusty, a little powdery. Iris really sits at the heart of this fragrance, but after I smelled it, I saw that, or I was able to detect that vanilla is a very significant player in this composition. So that iris, vanilla, and leather combination, I gotta admit, it reminded me of some amazing designer fragrances that I truly love, Dior Homme Parfum being one of them. Then there's also Valentino Uomo Noir Absolute. All of those fragrances with that sweet, sort of starchy, lipstick-like iris note smelled amazing. So throughout the course of this video, I'm gonna be letting you know if I think this is a great alternative to those fragrances, if I think it's better in any way. But let's go ahead and start things off with the presentation. Now, of course, with a name like Iris Malikhan, Iris is the name of the game here, and that is precisely what you're going to get from this fragrance. Right in the opening, you have this really natural smelling and very starchy iris note that kind of dominates the composition. Now, if you're not familiar with the smell of iris, it's this sort of waxy, slightly powdery, or I should say sometimes powdery, floral ingredient that can also smell like lipstick or a cosmetic bag. I know tuberose kind of has that effect. Sometimes for people, violet has that effect, but I think iris is really that, floral ingredient that always tends to give that smell of lipstick and perfumes. There's even a Maison Margiela fragrance that contains iris, and it also has lipstick in the name. So it's kind of a DNA or a vibe that's been played off by many different brands. And so here, of course, this fragrance is not trying to smell explicitly of lipstick or anything like that. Even after reading the narrative online, it doesn't mention it anywhere, but it does give you that natural and realistic smelling iris that does give off a lipstick feel, if you will. So you get that starchy, waxy, floral, and slightly powdery iris note that is going to remind you of lipstick or a cosmetic bag, but then there's also something very dry and dusty happening in the background. So the dustiness is kind of combining with the powderiness. So you kind of feel like you're in a desert somewhere, and it kind of has that vibe to it where it does put you in an exotic location, maybe far away from home, and it's a really special composition in the fact that it's able to transport you in that manner. I think that's really cool, and I think that that dustiness is created by the note of mimosa. Now, mimosa, and I'm not talking about champagne and orange juice, I'm talking about mimosa flower. Now, mimosa flower can be a little herbal, it can be a little powdery, but it can also be a little dusty. And that's kind of what you're gonna get from this. It's a little dusty and it's a little floral on account of the mimosa, but I think the mimosa is playing off of that floral tonality of the iris to give it this well-rounded floral appeal in the heart. Now, you know, one thing that I love about this is right from the opening, in addition to getting that dusty iris, which is on account of 2 ingredients, as I just said, I also picked up on the vanilla that's in here. And so this is an amber base that is dominated by vanilla, but it was that vanilla, spicy, iris, and dusty combination that kind of reminded me of like a freshly baked cookie. It was warm and sweet and very flavorful, and I was like, oh wow, this kind of has like a gourmand appeal in the opening. And that gourmand sentiment starts to sort of dry down and die out, while the vanilla does sort of stay there. It does become more explicitly or abundantly floral in the sense that, you know, then you start to think, okay, this is like a floral amber as opposed to a gourmand. But in the opening, I almost thought I was picking up on like a little bit of cinnamon, and there are some other unique ingredients in here like the mastic oil, which is resinous, but it gives it a very unique brightness. And then you also have galbanum, which is very green in its appeal. And so there's a lot of really interesting ingredients in here, but I think the spiciness that I was picking up on, while there might be cinnamon as a hidden player in here, there might also be a little bit of saffron, because I do see in the base there is a leather accord, and you know, a lot of spices usually comprise a leather accord, right? Because there's no such thing as real leather in perfumes. So you get that sort of sweet leathery iris, and immediately my mind went to Dior Homme Parfum or Valentino Uomo Noir Absolute. Now there are some other iris-based fragrances, some of which tend to go on the lighter, cleaner side of things. And of course, if you're talking about Dior Homme, the original, then that's also rather clean, maybe a little citrusy. But when you start getting into the darker iris fragrances like Dior Homme Intense or Dior Homme Parfum, those are my favorites personally, right? I do have a sweet tooth. I do gravitate towards the more gourmand fragrances, and this one is definitely on the sweeter side of things, but I don't think that the gourmand elements ever surpass the leather in terms of how strong it comes across. So I definitely get that spicy leather thing happening in the base. Definitely this dusty personality kind of enshrouding the iris, and it's a beautiful, beautiful iris-based fragrance. Just keep in mind that it's not of the more pure, soft, and subtle variety. It's more of the extroverted lipstick variety. And so I know Twisted Lily carries this one. They basically carry the whole Maison Crivelli line, if I'm not mistaken. And I think there's a new one that is coming out, a patchouli-based one that was made by Quentin Biche. I'm also really excited to try that as soon as it becomes available. But here we have a beautiful iris fragrance, and to be honest with you, there's something about the quality of the iris in this one that does actually make it seem a bit more natural than some of its designer counterparts. And I particularly love that sort of mimosa, leather, and galbanum combination that is contributing to that green herbal, slightly aromatic, but also dusty personality that is coming across with a little bit of that spiciness in the dry down. Very well done, and I'm so happy to finally have this in my collection. Let's go ahead and finish things off with my overall assessment. Now first, in terms of the uniqueness and the overall smell, of course I compared it to the Givenchy, the Valentino, the Christian Dior, but this fragrance does things in its own way, right? So many other brands have indeed experimented with a sweet iris, and of course Maison Crivelli is probably not the first, but they're doing it in an exceptionally well done manner that there are many, many, many elements to this fragrance that would make me want to wear it before I wear a Dior Homme Parfum, for example. As much as I do love those other designer fragrances, I think that this does embody various elements that make it stand out among those others, and it would warrant a purchase, right? So if you're a fan of some of those other fragrances that I mentioned, like Valentino Uomo Noir Absolute, or some of the other sweeter Valentino fragrances, I can definitely see you purchasing this despite already owning those other designers, because there are pieces in here that are unique enough to warrant a purchase. Longevity on this one was like 10 plus hours, incredible longevity. This one lasted probably a little bit more than their sandalwood offering, which was a little bit on the brighter side with the ginger and the citrus, but performance on this one was incredible. Projection on this one is great for the first 2 hours of application. I don't think it ever radiated beyond an arm's length because there isn't a whole lot happening in this one in the way of citrus ingredients, so it's not going to be overly loud in the opening, but the projection is rather strong and it is consistent. It didn't start to sit closer to the skin until about that 6 to 7 hour mark, so exceptional performance from this one. Versatility is great given the price and the ingredients and the DNA. This is the type of fragrance that I would be inclined to wear formally. Some people might argue that it leans a little bit feminine, at least traditionally speaking. I think it's perfectly unisex, especially given my experience with the Christian Dior fragrance, the Valentino fragrance. So there has been a lot of iris-based offerings done on the men's side of things. So I think it's perfectly unisex in my opinion. I can see this catering to the sentiments or the taste of somebody who's a little bit older, maybe has more experience with some of the lesser known ingredients in perfumes like iris and mimosa. And so some of these ingredients, or the combination of which, can be an acquired taste for some. So if it's somebody who's truly like a fragrance aficionado, I think they would love this one very much. And I can see this one working really well in every season. There are some darker elements like the leather and the amber that would make me say, yeah, go ahead, wear this in the autumn and the winter. But those bright floral ingredients like the iris would work perfectly well in the spring and summer. The only thing I would say is that in the summertime, just don't go too heavy on the trigger because it could be a little bit cloying, especially with the vanilla, the amber, the leather. But as long as you do 2, 3, or maybe even 4 sprays max, you'll get along or get away with it. No problem, no questions asked. In terms of the presentation, I really do like the silver hardware. The bottle and the box are very heavy. I love the card that's included in here and the atomizer for this fragrance. You can control how much you want to spray, a little bit or a lot. So it's a beautiful atomizer. My final verdict on this one is it's a beautifully done iris perfume that smells very natural, that has a very mature amount of sweetness to it so that it's not overdone and it's not, you know, juvenile in any manner. It's certainly an iris you have to check out, and I am positive that Twisted Lily carries it. If I do find any other e-commerce, I'm going to leave them down below. Thank you so much for watching this video. That was my review of Iris Malikhan by Maison Crivelli. So happy to finally have the opportunity to review this one after wanting it for a very long time since I saw my first review of it, which was about 6 months ago, if I'm not mistaken. So thank you for watching. Love you all. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider supporting the channel by subscribing to it. Hit that bell so you can be notified on future uploads, and give the video a thumbs up if you took something of value from today's episode. Thanks again for watching. Love you all. We'll see you next time. Bye.